So the person of peace concept is the most misunderstood concept in church planting movements or disciple making movements, or what people call contagious disciple making. The person of peace is based off of Luke chapter 10, where Jesus instructs the disciples to go into the villages that he's about to visit and to find the person of peace or worthy person, enter that house, and then the idea is that the gospel would spread through them and their household. And we see it in the book of Acts. We see Cornelius and his household, the Philippian jailer and his household, Lydia and her household, and those kind of things happening. And disciple making movements, contagious disciple making, is built on that we go into communities that we do not belong to. We find these people that God is already working in their hearts, and then we join God in his work and invite them to discover him through reading his word, not just them, but their whole family. And the idea is that the whole family's discipled into a relationship with Christ at the same time, so that we're not pulling someone out and they have to be isolated from their family or from their community. Now, the problem with that is that you get a lot of people who are going out like gangbusters looking for these persons of peace, and they forget something very, very important. They forget to be disciple makers where God has planted them. You see, you need both. You need to be going to communities you're not a part of and look to plant the gospel in those communities through finding persons of peace, indigenous leaders that you can raise up. But we also need to be disciple makers where we're planted. My mom and dad tell a story of a time we were living in Malaysia. And mom and dad, my dad is not the kind of guy that likes to go to a grocery store or any store for that matter and just shop. The internet was created for my father. He likes to go online, Amazon.com, buy what he wants and have it delivered to his door so he doesn't have to mess with crowds. But back in the day, he couldn't do that. And we lived in a country in Malaysia where we couldn't do that. And so there was a busy time of year called, it was the time at the end of the fast for Ramadan. And mom and dad had to go to the grocery store. They just had to. We were out of everything. And so it was a busy time. They went there. Dad took the list. He ripped it in half. He gave half to mom, and he kept half for himself. They each got separate baskets. And then they went through the grocery store and they got everything. And the idea was to cut your time in half because they were dividing the labor. Well, they get to the front, and Dad finds a lane that just opened. I mean, he's 4 carts back, and he's looking at all the other lanes, and he's looking for my mom, and he looks across the store, and my mom is standing in the longest line in the entire store. Now, my mom and dad speak sign language, so they start carrying on a conversation, and my dad's like, well, you need to come to my lane. It's only 4 people, and mom basically tells him, no, this is the lane we're in. Now, Dad had been married for a while at that time, and so he realized that he wasn't going to win this argument. And he ends up pushing his cart all the way across the store, and they get in the longest line. And he starts talking to my mom and asking, well, why this line? And my mom points at the cash register, the teller who's checking out all the groceries. And she says, I've been building a relationship with this woman for the last several months. And I always come to this line because that's how I build relationship. So they stood in line and they got to the front, and you could just tell that the woman behind the register was really tired. And my mom called her by name and asked her how she was doing. And then the woman had recognized my mom right away and smiled at her. And my mom ended up looking at her at the end of the conversation and offering to pray, and then prayed for her right there. And that wasn't normal in the country that we were living in at the time. Well, ultimately, the relationship with that woman and ended up getting my parents invited to their home, ended up meeting the whole family, and the whole family came to know Jesus as a result of going to the same register of the store every week. Now, that woman wasn't technically a person of peace in the miraculous sense of the word, but she was someone that my parents in their natural comings and goings of life encountered on a regular basis, and over time built relationship that resulted in her and her family coming into the kingdom. Now, I just got back from Walmart. You know, when you grow up watching your family do that, you can't help but do it yourself. And I've got a neighborhood Walmart down the road, and I've been going and seeing this to the same cash register every time I go. And if she's there, I talk to the same person checking me out every time. She's moved up here from Georgia. She was a preschool, toddler, 2-year-old teacher for 28 years. She was married to her husband for 31 years, and on their 25th wedding anniversary, they ended up going to Hawaii together. She's a widow, and her husband died, and she got a job at Walmart because she wanted to stay busy. And she's been building a retaining wall the last year, brick by brick, and she's 9 bricks away, blocks away from finishing the wall. Every time I go in, I talk to her. And this time she recognized me, and I said, "So how's that wall coming?" And she's like, "I knew you were going to ask." And I ended up talking to her about that. And she said, "So what do you got going that you're here in the middle of the day?" And I said, "Well, I've got some people coming over." And she goes, "Oh, well, really, what are they doing?" And so I described about bringing on board a teammate and them living in my house. And she said, "Well, what do you do?" And I say, "Well, I train advocates for the community, people that would get to know the needs of the community and work to meet those needs and listen to stories of what's going on." And she says, "Is this a Christian thing?" I said, "Yeah, it is." She goes, "I figured." And then as we're getting done, she kind of taps my thing and she says, "Make sure and come back and tell me how it goes." And I leave. Now that relationship has been built brick by brick over time. And whether or not this woman is a person of peace, it doesn't matter to me. She's in my community, and it is my responsibility as a person myself, as a disciple maker, to pray for her, to ask her how she's doing, and to make sure that eventually, if she's not already a follower of Christ, that she has an opportunity to hear the good news and respond to it herself. So don't forget, as we talk about the persons of peace, and we love the miraculous stories of what happens when we find persons of peace, don't forget, as disciple makers, we're responsible to disciple everyone that comes into our contact, that's in our sphere of life, as well as looking on the horizon and asking our Heavenly King, "Where do you want me to go next?" And if you do that, then you'll be obeying the Great Commission. And then we will see God's kingdom come and His will be done on earth as it is in heaven.